And yeah, let's kick it off. So first off, a very short introduction for those of you who don't know me or we haven't met yet on Growth Mentor or elsewhere. I'm Vasilena, or Vasi for short, which is the version that my friends and colleagues use. So feel free to use that. I've been in marketing for about a bit over 15 years now, with a key focus on digital marketing and specifically on content marketing and messaging. So what I do is I help brands to present themselves in front of users, differentiate themselves from competitors, and then build connections and long-lasting relationships with customers based on the value we can bring through content. So if you want to connect with me, the two best places would be LinkedIn and Twitter, at least for the time being. And you can also find more about me on my website, where I also author some articles about marketing that you might find useful. So I was very hesitant when I suggested this Talk for Our workshop to Spiros, because every year it seems like everyone is jumping in and trying to say, okay, this is where the world is heading nowadays and so on. And if the last 2.5 to 3 years taught us anything, it's that we have literally no idea where things are going. And the best thing we can do is to actually see and actually look rather, and keep our eyes open and figure out how the different changes are affecting our work. So I'm not going to be trying to disrupt or transform or reinvent marketing and marketing skills that you need. I'm just going to try to give you some of the things that I've seen over the past couple of months as recent changes and what I think they mean for marketers and where we can go from here on out in 2023. So I don't possess a crystal ball, sadly, but I've been going through a lot of research over the past few months. And there are a few key changes that keep coming up again and again. The first one of them is obviously the economic, social, and political craziness that's happening currently. And this is something everyone is talking about, but it seems that we are more talking than reacting to this, really. So what does that mean for marketers? Especially, let's start with the inflation and what we've been seeing in terms of economic climate. So according to the CMO survey, which is one of the, at least to me, one of the most relevant research pieces from marketing leaders, it seems that some marketers are decreasing marketing spend, but not to the level we would expect, because almost half of people say there isn't really any impact on their plans for marketing spending. Mind you, this was done in September, but I doubt that by the end of the year, things look differently. So when we're talking about changing economic terms, we need to keep in mind that this is a slow build-up and a slow process. And to me, the most important thing here is not to decrease marketing spend, but rather continue asking the questions of, am I investing the budget that I currently have in the wisest, most efficient manner? And this is what we'll need to answer and address in the coming months. Another thing that we've seen here is the fact that there's a lot of questions to what does it mean, the inflation that we're seeing in practical terms, in terms of actual marketing actions. So the good news here is that marketing layoffs are not something that's going to be coming, or at least that's not something CMOs are focusing on. It's right at the bottom of the list. But one thing that made an impression on me here is this point here. Obviously, increasing prices, that's gonna come, of course, but the need for stronger value propositions is a key thing that we can focus on here. This means that we'll need to get better at positioning our products and really telling customers why they need us and what they're gonna get from using us or choosing us rather than competitors. So here, there's a lot that I'll be talking about in terms of actually identifying and addressing customer needs, and building that messaging and that brand positioning to really show that we are the right choice. Another thing that's sort of striking here is the fact that brands are becoming more comfortable to talk about politically charged issues. So what we've seen in this Deloitte research, this is still data from the CMO survey, is the fact that more than 30% of CMOs, and this, keep in mind, these are big international, very conservative companies. Even in conservative companies, people are taking note and are paying attention to the changing political and social terms, and they are trying to address them with marketing. So this is actually the biggest percentage of marketers agreeing that brands need to address political issues since the start of Deloitte's CMO survey back in 2008. They've never seen a number this high. And this reflects what customers are actually looking for, and not just customers, but employees and investors as well. So what they see is the fact that we want to buy from brands that address the same values or espouse the same values that we have. We want to work in places where we have a value fit rather. And investors, they want to invest in companies that have the right beliefs and values as well. So this 30% here, this isn't just about marketers being wide-eyed and looking at the world and figuring out that we can't hide anymore and we can't just neglect everything that's happening outside. It's an actual economic need if the brand needs to stay relevant. And this is what the Trust Barometer data here that you see in front is showing us. Is there a question, or was that just a...
I think it was
okay. Yeah, it was a microphone mishap. Okay, so the second thing that we're seeing here is the issues that we're seeing with personalization. I think like everyone who wished something to CMO Santa, they probably wished for first-party data because it's getting more and more difficult to actually know about our customers. And this is data from Gartner, another one of the major players in predicting trends. So on the one hand, what they see is that if we provide meaningful brand experiences to customers, then we're getting them to be more committed to our brand. So this means that we need to provide the right experience to the right customer. And that largely happens with personalization. But on the other hand, customers are getting more and more protective of their data and more aware that there are all sorts of ways that brands and platforms sort of track them online. So you can see here how big the number is of people trying to take all sorts of steps to stay a bit anonymous online, at least when it comes to marketing and remarketing. So to me, this means two things. On the one hand side, we can't really rely on external data anymore. This has been a reality we've been slowly coming to terms across the last few years, but it's really here. The thing is happening as we speak. But then at the same time, we need to start relying more on personal communication with customers and on actually leading conversations rather than just looking at data. So we might not be able to provide a completely personalized experience from the get-go, but we need to, on the one hand side, talk to customers and use anecdotal evidence to understand what they need. And at the same time, we need to provide value for them. My answer to that question would be through content, because I'm obviously a content marketer at heart, and this is my preferred way. So once we provide value through content, we can ask for additional information, and then we can get this first-party data that everyone's been dreaming about. So we need to get smarter at creating content that really brings value, so much value, in fact, that it gets people excited to give us their email back or share with us what company they work for and what's their annual marketing budget or whatever other information makes sense. The third big issue is attribution. And this has been happening again for a few years, but it's really something that's becoming more and more apparent now. Ever since iOS 14, we've been losing data in a very substantial manner that hurts almost physically. But we're also getting a sort of a different experience now, understanding that attribution was never there to begin with. And every year, marketers say that it's hard to prove the ROI of marketing. But one thing that we're seeing now is the increase in investment on marketing analytics platforms. So we're seeing here, again, this is part of the CMO survey, and this is another record that Deloitte has put here, which is 8.9% of the whole marketing budget for big companies is going into marketing analytics. And it's projected to get up to 14.5% across the next 3 years. So seeing that brands are putting money where their mouth is, this to me is the most obvious example where you can say, okay, attribution is really a big issue that brands need to solve. And I've been looking at this for a few years, and the best thing I've seen coming out of the attribution discussion is the growing realization that we can't really attribute everything. So this is a great article, and you have the link here in the slides from Rand Fishkin. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend reading this piece because it shows how fickle marketing attribution actually is. And he gives a great example of a post saying how a customer actually became a SparkToro customer. So he signed up for SparkToro, the software. And all the touch points that are going here, they're either impossible to measure or they're very hard to measure. So this is sort of a two-way street when it comes to attribution. On the one hand side, we have the need to work with tools and to start understanding the tool stack that we can get better and to implement the right tracking methods to at least measure what we can measure. But on the other hand side, we need to keep in mind that we can't measure everything, and we need to be okay with what I've dubbed here in the next slide, soft attribution. So figuring out the indirect effects of our marketing efforts. Another sort of example here by a big marketing name that's saying the same thing, Tim Sulo, the founder of the SEO tool Ahrefs. He has a great presentation when he says, essentially, if we're only focusing on the stuff we can measure, we're losing sight of a lot of other value that we can get out of marketing activities that might not give us direct attribution results, but they are very important and vital to our overall marketing. So on the first hand side, that's a mindset shift. So we need to be okay with not having the full picture when it comes to attribution. On the other hand side, it's a question of being good at educating the team and telling them, okay, even though we can't track that, here are the additional ways in which we can actually get information and we can get value out of different activities that we're leading. And the fourth issue here is the question of where are we actually doing marketing? And this has been a thing that's been growing over the past few years. So if we look at the time it took TikTok to reach 1 million monthly active users, it's less than double, almost 1/3 of the time it took Instagram to reach these same numbers. And this is sort of an example of the quicker pace of new technology adoption. So we need to be very nimble, and we need to start testing out and experimenting in new channels as soon as they hit at least a marginal number of users that make sense to us, that who are within our target group. And the other issue here is that we never know if something that's currently growing big is going to be a big thing, in fact, or it's going to be a fad. So back in 2021, Clubhouse was something everyone was talking about, and there was a lot of focus on, okay, how big can this trend of social audio go? We saw that other than the two spikes that we saw in the first half of 2021, this has really been like a dud. There isn't a big number of people who are getting on Clubhouse day in and day out. There isn't an increase in adoption currently. So it's tough to say what's working and what will be working in the long term rather, and what isn't. For example, is Mastodon really going to be a Twitter killer? Well, we have no idea at the moment. It might be, or it might not. We'll see in a few months. But what this means for marketers is that we need to be quicker in making decisions, and in even having sort of snap judgments to start testing out in a new network as soon as it hits its stride, rather than waiting and seeing and waiting and seeing until it gets as competitive as any other channel out there. So this was I'm trying to keep this brief because I want to go into a discussion with you, but I'm gonna share a few more notes here on the things that are changing and the skills that are changing. Because to me, seeing what skills are in demand is also, on the one hand side, proof that there are certain areas of marketing that more and more brands are going into, so it might be lucrative to go in there as well. And on the other hand, it's also proof that some fields are getting more and more competitive, and we need to be very on point in our marketing game if we want to succeed there. So the good news is, if you're working for a company or you're looking for a job in the marketing field, that skills is currently all there is. HBR did some research at the start of last year where they saw that for most positions in marketing, a degree isn't as important anymore. So you don't need to have been into like a stellar university or a big school to actually get a decent job. Skills are all that matters. So the better we can get in our skills as marketers, the more lucrative positions we can have access to. But skills are very, very tough and competitive and getting even more dynamic. So what LinkedIn has seen when they compared the skills that are sought after on the platform now compared to 2015 is that a quarter of the skill sets that are currently in demand weren't even in existence or weren't in the top 10 back in 2015. And they predict that the change between 2015 and 2025 is going to be 41%. So almost half of the skills that we'll need in 2 years' time are something that weren't here 10 years ago. So this is sort of ridiculous and scary, to be frank, but it's also an example of how quickly we need to change and adapt and change the marketing skills that we're using in our day-to-day job. So here's what they're seeing in their data. And this is really like a few of these I have big issues with, because digital marketing isn't really a skill that's a whole field in its own. But putting that aside, what we're seeing here, things like search engine optimization and content marketing and Google Analytics, those are things that weren't a thing in 2015, and they're some of the most in-demand marketing directions, let's call them now. So seeing that list, that also helps me sort of figure out where we're going and what we need to focus on. So for sure, content is a big thing here. Email marketing also depends largely on content. SEO and content marketing are very directly connected. So I would say that this is one field where we need to think more about. So how are we creating content? How are we distributing content across different channels to keep in touch with the audiences we want to reach? The other thing that I'm frankly very, very happy about is that social media has gone off the first place and is going downwards, because social media marketing is almost like, telemarketing or something like that. I mean, it's a different channel rather than a different skill. So I'd say a lot of the things that are applicable for content marketing or for good copywriting in general are also applicable to social media. So it's not a different thing in itself. So I'm happy to see that there's a gradual loss of focus on social media as its own strategy or skill set. It's part of everything else, really. And of course, the elephant in the room is AI. So frankly, I can't even begin to predict how AI is going to change our day-to-day job. I've been playing around with ChatGPT across the past few weeks, and I'm simultaneously impressed, terrified, and sort of bored of it, because sometimes it gets things in a stellar way, and other times it's just like you're asking a 3-year-old to summarize an article. But in any case, this is something that's gonna keep getting better and bigger, and it's something that we need to start learning to use in our day-to-day jobs. And I definitely say that using a specific tool like ChatGPT isn't the big thing here. The big thing is being interested and curious about new technological developments, and not be like a Luddite who's trying to break a weaving machine back in the 1800s when the Industrial Revolution was first starting. We can't go back in time. This is gonna be part of our marketing stack, and it's gonna be something that we need to learn to use. So the main thing here is to start using it as early as possible and start learning what it can do, where it can be helpful, or where it just is missing the mark. So if I'm talking about specific skill sets, I have 3 sets of skills that I think will be really important and continue to be important to us, not just in 2023, but over the upcoming years as well. And this isn't something that, AI technology is going to change, that the changes in attribution are going to affect that much. It's about sort of getting back to some of the basics, the core principles of marketing, and making sure that we're not just mindful of them, but we're masters of this type of skills. I had written a line in the intro to this workshop about Jeff Bezos. And the reason for that was that he's always been of the position that in today's world where things are changing constantly, we need to go back and think about the things that are not going to change in the future. So this is sort of similar to that same concept. These 3 categories are something that I don't think will change for marketers in the long run. And if we stop chasing the shiny new things and keep obsessing about the new inflation numbers and just get back to these core principles, we're going to be successful in our work as marketers. So the first category here is customer empathy. And what I mean by customer empathy is really doing the most and the best audience research that we can. Talking to customers, doing interviews, so sharpening our interview skills, making sure that we can synthesize the information we see online about our customers and our audiences, be it in qualitative tools where we can get that information from, or through interviews and individual feedback from surveys or whatever other types we're using. So this means that we also need to understand how the different current trends are affecting our target audience specifically. And here it's not about looking at the trend itself. So we don't need to be some sort of, black turtleneck futurist type of person to understand that. It's about looking at the trends and saying, okay, is this gonna fly with my specific type of audience? To give you an example, yes, Mastodon is currently big among techies, among people who are interested in jumping on board of the new technologies, or rather the new platforms that are getting big. But if I'm looking at my social circle, most of the people who are using Twitter to just get the latest news on the developments in Ukraine, or trying to follow their favorite sci-fi authors, they're not going to move to the Mastodon at the moment. So I need to understand, based on the specific type of customer that I'm serving, is this going to be a big trend for them or isn't? And the last thing I've included in here is sort of a weird and maybe a bit of a fickle thing to say, but understanding channel etiquette is quite big. What I mean by that is making sure that we're communicating in the new channels in a way that feels natural and native to the platform itself. Over the past few months, I've been trying to learn TikTok in the same way that I would almost learn a new language. I'm jumping on the platform for 15 minutes a day, usually after I brush my teeth, in order to see what's the type of content that gets shared and noticed in the platform. And this is going to help me serve my audience better. So you can't really, jump and start doing marketing on TikTok if you've never been on the platform itself. And this has been true for ages. I mean, everyone who's ever tried to market on Reddit without being an actual user of the platform knows how hard it can be. So making sure that we understand those platforms and how our audience engages with content on them, that's still going to continue being important. And this isn't something that you're going to be able to learn by asking ChatGPT, The second category of skills that I think are going to continue being important has to do with, on the one hand side, the strategic side of positioning and brand differentiation. And on the other hand side, the direct copywriting work of developing our key brand messaging. There are tools that can help you churn copy in huge amounts and help you create content for your landing pages or your email campaigns. But this is always gonna more or less fail unless you have a clear idea of what your audience wants to hear. So looking at something like using voice of customer data and injecting that information in your copywriting, this will continue to be important because it is the bedrock on which we need to base our copywriting work. It's not going to be about creating cutesy headlines for a Facebook ad. You need to understand what people actually want from your product and the exact language they use and reflect that language back to users. So this is sort of the biggest hang-up I have currently with all the AI-based tools that are currently available at our disposal as marketers, especially when it comes to copywriting, not creating content, but writing copy, conversion copywriting, because yes, an algorithm can create and reword content in a way that makes sense, but is it going to be resonating with people? I still feel that we need a human being on that end. I might be very, conservative in that prediction, but I still feel that copywriters don't need to be as concerned as everyone is making them out to be at the moment. And the other thing here is thinking about the broader marketing context and the different competitors that are at play within our market and are vying for our audience's attention. And this can happen by using an automated tool like Get It Out to look for information on your target persona and try to understand who are the exact other tools or softwares that they might use. But it is much better to understand the actual job to be done that the customer has and recognizing the true competitors based off of that, because they might not be the direct alternatives you can find by even doing online research and looking at information on popular alternative-based websites. It is something you need to understand for your users specifically, depending on what's their core job to be done and what's the need that they have. Frankly, for maybe something like 80% of the companies I work with, the alternative to the product that we're selling is either not doing it at all or getting more people on the team to manually do it and using some horrid amalgamation of spreadsheets and a person hiding behind a semi-automated system or something like that. So figuring out who those, what those alternatives are and how we can show people that we're better than them and how we can differentiate, this is still gonna be an important skill to develop. So some people say that copywriting is sort of like a dying profession nowadays. I vehemently disagree with that. And the last category I want to mention here is analytics, attribution, and measuring the results of marketing. So on the one hand side, there's a lot of new technologies and tools that are getting better at surfacing insights for marketers. I can definitely mention Triple Whale as one of the tools that I've been playing around with in the past few months, and I'm very happily surprised or positively surprised by the quality of the insights that an automated machine can give me when looking at data coming in from different advertising platforms and from our own backend tools. But here comes the issue with attribution. It's never 100%. We can never say, okay, this is a perfect model of what our marketing is bringing in terms of ROI. So we need to understand the tool stack, first off, to use it right, and then to understand what are the limitations. So currently on that end, GA4 is a big question. I hope you guys have already set up your GA4 tracking if you're using Google Analytics currently, and you are able to actually start getting data from there and seeing what are the changes to the tracking and what new information you can glean out of that. But that's a very simple example. There are a ton of other tools you're probably using in your day-to-day job to understand what value marketing activities bring. And we need to be able to collect that information to, again, do some synthesis work and take out the insights. But we also need to understand that there are indirect results that we need to continue taking into account. To give you an example, when I'm sending out my email marketing newsletter, I'm looking at the stats I have, like the open rates and click rates, and there's sort of a benchmark that's gonna alert me if there's a big deliverability issue or if a message completely missed the mark. But at the same time, I'm looking at sort of soft stats or soft data that's telling me if the content resonated or not. I might get a few different replies to my weekly email, and out of those replies, the quality of the feedback I'm getting from people, even sort of the number of those, but that's not as important. I understand if a topic I was talking about in my newsletter resonated with my audience or not. And this isn't true, data science or measurement in the real sense of the word. It's soft data, qualitative feedback that I'm getting, and I'm basing most of the decisions on what content to include in next week's edition of the newsletter based off of this qualitative data rather than the quantitative results that I'm seeing in terms of open rates and click rates. So having that mindset shift and also educating the rest of the team that this is the way we need to assess marketing with a combination of both soft and hard data. This is something we'll continue to be doing in 2023 and beyond, because this is going to be an issue that keeps on growing. So if we're looking at the bajillion things we can start learning in terms of different skills, where are we getting this information from? I have a sort of a simple structure that I've created here that's assessing different types of resources depending on how practical or theoretical the knowledge that I get from them is. And at the same time, how structured and all-encompassing the information is, or how specific and tactical it is. So here's the few categories that I would definitely urge you to invest time in. One is obviously books. I'm an avid reader, so I couldn't, completely dismiss books, although I've not included anything in this sort of quadrant here, because looking at completely theoretical information is not something I would advise anyone nowadays. So the good marketing books that are out there, they already have some practical knowledge, but the great benefit of that is that they provide you with structured information. At the same time, we have blogs who are much more practical compared to books, but they're more specific to particular issues that we're looking for. We can look at other formats like newsletters and podcasts, who are more on the specific end of the spectrum here, but they're much more practical. So over the past few months, I've learned more from newsletters and podcasts, and I've implemented more new ideas that I've come across from newsletters and podcasts compared to anything else that's in my standard, learning diet that I currently have. And we can look at stuff like courses to get more structured and practical information, and participating in communities, both online and offline, to get the specific and highly practical information from other practitioners out there. So getting a mix of all of those formats is going to be how I am going to continue upskilling in 2023. You can obviously make the choice for yourself, but feel free to take my recommendation here and sort of create a diet for yourself that's combining both more structured approaches that are giving you high-level information about completely new fields in marketing that you're not familiar with, and combining that with practical and tactical specific information that can help you try something new today. And finally, something I haven't included here, because that would have been hell to first off present on a 2D surface and then to tell you guys, is that there are different learning modalities that we're all more or less accustomed to or comfortable with. So if you're prefer reading, then books and blogs will be probably your number one choice. If you prefer hearing information, then podcasts or videos and courses are going to be your go-to source for information. So that's also an important part that we want to take into account. The key hack for learning more and learning better is something a friend of mine called a few years back the who strategy. The who strategy essentially means find out the person who is going to give you the highest amount of quality recommendations in the shortest amount of time. So in this case, I'll be looking for someone who's already doing a job in this field For example, if I want to up my technical SEO skills, I have a few people in mind who are great with SEO. And I'm gonna go directly to them and say, hey, I'm looking for some recommendations. Can you give me your list of 5 or 6 different resources, like websites that you're reading on a regular basis, or books that you would say make a good overall structured overview of what's currently hot in technical SEO? Or would you say there are some specific practitioners who are doing a very good job at this and I should follow them on LinkedIn? Getting a direct recommendation is going to save you so much time that it's sort of almost like an unfair advantage. And also being at the Growth Mentor event, this is exactly sort of the big value of Growth Mentor to me. You always have access to someone who's in that field, who's a great specialist in that field, and you can ask for more. And the other key hack is to start implementing things and putting things to practice as quickly as possible. So what I try to do is whenever I'm reading something new and I see something that makes a ton of sense and I want to internalize as a new learning or a new skill, I try to put it in practice and I try to frame it. I have a big backlog of ideas for my blog. So I would write down at least one thing I can do to use this concept in practice. I haven't really found a better shortcut to internalize new knowledge than doing stuff with your own hands. So this is sort of the way I learn, and I think you'll find it valuable as well. I'm sure you're already doing that to some degree, but having that list of ideas where after each piece you read or each new chapter from a book you're reading or looking at a video from a course, if you take that moment to write that down and then add it to your next week's to-do list, this is going to bring massive results, I promise you. So you see here a link. So first off, what we're going to do is, to everyone who's already signed up for this workshop online, you're going to receive an email tomorrow with a list of recommendations from the categories I mentioned earlier. If you're watching this as a recording in a few months after we've already done this this session, then you can go to this link, volchanova.me/skills2023, where you're going to be able to get the list of recommendations that I have. So I've split them into the categories I mentioned earlier. First off, I've included some courses. They are big, they can be expensive and they can be a big part from your learning and development budget, but they're going to give you the structured basis for the new categories of marketing that you're trying to get into. If you're still looking for a social interaction with people, then communities is going to be my go-to place. And I've mentioned here a few of my favorite Slack communities, but going live to events in your neck of the woods, that's going to be the most important thing, because having a direct interaction with people is also super important. I'm not going to go through the rest of these categories because I've only listed 3 for each one of these here, but you get a list of maybe 20 different blogs, for example, that I would definitely urge you to check out and start getting information from on a regular basis. There's also a bunch of podcasts because, well, I'm a runner, so I need something to do while doing my weekly long run. So podcasts are definitely the one of the things that I want to look at. And then newsletters are sort of a favorite of mine because they are a great filter that you can take advantage of. So getting information that others have already curated for you, that means you need to spend less time to actually look for the information yourself. And what I want to sort of finish up here is this. I mentioned at the start that, doing this upskilling game, we need a plan. We need to figure out what we want to do and how we want to get about doing it. So this learning plan is going to be very short and sweet, and you can really draft it on a piece of paper or in your favorite note-taking app and start improving on it. This is also a short worksheet that you're going to get with the resources coming to you tomorrow. So the first question is, what are the skills we want to develop? And what's the type of knowledge that I need? Depending on how advanced I am with the skill that I'm trying to develop now, I might want to look for something more structured, like a course that's going to give me a whole one-on-one intro to the topic. Or I might be looking for more specific recommendations and more tactical insights into how to continue growing the skill if I already know the basics. Then my best approach would be to try to shortcut this process by reaching out to someone who can give me their own ideas and recommendations on how I can develop that skill. So who is that person? Who can this be? I mean, you have a whole directory of experts at your fingertips with Growth Mentor. So I guess that's an obvious choice, but obviously anyone within your social circle can work here. And then I need to figure out what are the resources that I'm going to use and how I'm going to build a habit out of learning that. And this is going to be directly connected to how I'm putting to practice what I'm learning. So what's the habit there? Am I going to be writing down one thing that I'm going to implement next week? Am I going to start a passion project to try to test out these new ideas in practice before I put them to use for my brand? It can be anything really, but you need to know what you'll be doing and how you're going to be going forward. So answering all of these questions, even like taking 15 minutes after this talk and trying to answer each one, my preferred way would be in written form. This is going to give you a detailed plan on how to continue forward. And from then on, as I mentioned earlier, we need to be reactive to the changes in the market, but always trying to sort of look at them through the lens of our target customers and figure out, okay, is this a skill that I need to develop to serve my audience better and to reach my audience better? Or is it a fad that I don't need to focus on in this current moment? So you may have seen this in one of the previous slides when I was talking about courses, but I do have something to plug in here. And this is sort of the reason why I've been so interested in creating learning plans and learning and development for marketers in general. And this is the fact that I've recently launched my own marketing course that's focused on content marketing and messaging and conversion copywriting. So I'm not going to take too much time out of your busy day or evening, depending on where you're based across the globe. What I'm going to tell you is if you go to this link, volchanova.me/gm-course, you're going to see more information about it. And if you feel that it's something you might want to test out for yourself, then there's a discount for our Growth Mentor tribe there that you can take advantage of. It's valid by the end of the month, so all throughout January. So you have some time to think about it and figure out if you want to look into that. I'm not gonna toot my own horn anymore. The last thing I want to finish off is if you're not ready to take the next step with a course, I have a newsletter, as I mentioned earlier. So if you want to get some curated insights on the new developments in marketing from me, this is the link that you can go to. And this is what I had to share with you now. We have some time left for questions, so I would kindly ask Spiros to help me out here and see if we have anything that we can discuss and answer.